Welcome to RuralStrong, where we talk real challenges and bold solutions in rural economic development. I'm your host, Joe Barker. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Barker, your RuralStrong podcast host, and we are broadcasting today from the Southwest Tennessee Development District podcast studio in beautiful downtown Jackson, Tennessee. And we have a treat today. Not only is he one of the most outstanding young men I know, he's a good friend, but you're going to enjoy this podcast today because he's going to talk about something that we all know is happening all around us, but we're going to get a little more in depth. And our guest today is Matt Marshall, and he is the president and CEO of United Way of West Tennessee. Matt, welcome to RuralStrong.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. So glad to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you, and let's do this first. For those that might not be familiar with United Way across the country, tell our listeners about United Way and what you focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. So United Way is one of the longest serving nonprofit agencies in the country. And we primarily, the thing we're known best for are our United Way campaigns that we run in almost every community around the United States and really around the world, where we encourage employees of local companies to give a little bit out of their paychecks each week or each month to go towards needs in their community, supporting other nonprofits. And so we collect those resources in the form of what we call community impact buckets, and then we dole those grants out to nonprofit agencies each year. And so that's what most United Ways do. We've been doing that for over 100 years. In fact, I tell people all the time, if you've ever played Monopoly, there's two cards you can draw on the Monopoly board. One is the game of chance, which may net you $300 or may put you in jail, right? But the other is called the community bucket card, and so community chest specifically. And that is actually the original name of United Way. We were Community Chest. And so we all changed our name to United Way back in the 50s and 60s, but we still do that same work. And then here in West Tennessee, and we'll talk a little bit about this, I'm sure, during our time together, we run a lot of other programs as well, just to try to be a help to people in the community.
Now, does United Way work mostly with the private sector as far as their funding source?
It's a little bit of both nowadays. Used to, it was almost exclusively the private sector. So again, we would work with industry, with corporations, with those companies to, again, do that fundraising through their employees. Now, just how the world has changed, we also do a lot of grants ourselves through state and federal grants so that we can secure those funds and execute certain programs and initiatives in the community. But then also nowadays as well, we do some privatized funding in terms of individual donors and that type of thing. But then also we see these new opportunities that arise for all different types of ventures and things like that, where we will have communities come in, mayors, local government that also donate towards certain projects. So our Financial Empowerment Center, which we'll talk about later, is a perfect example of that. It's both private and public funded, which kind of aligns with those whole private-public partnerships that people talk about all the time.
Now, does United Way have a presence in all 50 states?
We have a presence in all 50 states, and technically, every single zip code in the United States is covered by United Way, technically. Now, the reality is that coverage can be difficult in certain communities, depending on where their local United Way is actually stationed, so to speak. And so here in West Tennessee, we have a 15-county footprint. So we oversee work in every single county west of the river, except for Benton and Obion County, which have their own small United Ways. And then Tipton, Lauderdale, Fayette, and Shelby are in United Way of the Mid-South in Memphis. But all the rest of those counties in West Tennessee, that's our service area. And we try to the best of our ability to show up and be present there and how we support different initiatives and different programming and different nonprofits. And that's generally true across the country.
All right, let's talk about a specific program. I know I have attended several meetings that you've had, and it just it's something that is troubling,
Yeah.
challenging, and I know that you have become really involved in it. And it has the acronym ALICE.
Yes.
And tell our listeners what ALICE is.
Absolutely. So, Joe, back in 2013, there was a professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey who really became concerned about trends that she was seeing in data related to economic stability across America. And so she began to kind of put this data together by state, by zip code. We'll talk more about how deep we can go into it in a little bit. But she produced the first Alice report. Her name is Dr. Stephanie Hoops. She then partnered with United Way of Northern New Jersey to turn this into a national model. And then in 2019, Tennessee got on board. We now, since 2013 to the present, have about 39 of the states that are doing this, with more being added every year. But essentially, what this report reveals to us is, for a long time across the country, we've looked at certain data points to try to understand what need looks like. So obviously, people are familiar with the federal poverty level. But there's also other things like the Consumer Price Index and other measurement tools. But what we found is that all of those are actually quite inadequate when it comes to telling the true story that everyday Americans are facing. And so ALICE, which stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained Employed, is a measurement of households in our communities who are working every single day, often 2 or 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet. But what the data shows us is that they are still struggling to do so. And that's due to a number of different variables. And so back in 2019, when Tennessee first got on board with ALICE, this was one of the first decisions I made when I came into this role at United Way of West Tennessee as the CEO, was to adopt this report and begin telling this story for West Tennesseans, because actually, of the 3 grand divisions, we have some of the greatest challenges.
So basically, it's the working poor.
Absolutely.
People, as you say, that go to work every day, pay their taxes, but have the challenges that everyone has, and the income, as they say, the check runs out before the end of the month.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what the data shows us is that this is roughly every other person you meet every day. So here in West Tennessee, it's about 51% of folks. And so what is encapsulated in that number are those who are actually living in poverty, which is roughly about, it fluctuates between 17 and 20%. But then there's another 30% on top of that are also, again, as you called it, and as we have historically referred to it, working poor, or ALICE. And so, as you said, they're working every day, but they're struggling trying to figure out how they're going to pay their rent. They're struggling to figure out how they're going to pay their utilities or their child care or food. And if they get just a flat tire on the way to work, that doesn't set them back. If they can't make it to work that day, that doesn't set them back just that day's income. That could set them back for weeks or months. And again, it's half the population.
One of the meetings I attended a few weeks ago, and I know a representative from your office was there, but it was amazing to me. The presenter was talking about if a family had an unexpected $400 expense during the month, it could be car breakdown or it could be a health issue. It was staggering how many people in this country would struggle to meet that $400 unexpected expense.
Absolutely, because ALICE families typically within their budget aren't able to save. As you said a moment ago, they're not able really to put anything back because they don't have it in their budget to do so. And so when we look again at that data, one of the examples I love to point out is a 2-parent household with 2 young children, family of 4, typical American family, right? That family here in West Tennessee, just to survive, would need to bring home $70,000 a year. Now, you may go, that's probably doable. Well, yeah, but the median household income in West Tennessee is only 50. And so that means that there's this $20,000 gap between what it costs to survive and what the average family actually brings home. Now, if we zoomed in even further and said, well, again, what does that mean if we want them to actually operate a stable budget? Because that $70,000 a year budget doesn't include savings, doesn't include vacation, doesn't include any expensive items that you would normally be looking at for a normal family. And by expensive items, I mean cable, right? I mean
Sure.
a cell phone, internet plan. I'm talking about that type of stuff. It doesn't include any of those things. And that's a $70,000 budget. That same family would need to bring home $110,000 a year to actually operate a stable budget where they're able to save. And that therein lies a challenge, again, when the median is half of that.
And Tennessee is a relatively inexpensive state.
Absolutely.
Those metrics really change when you get in other states across the country.
Yeah, that's right. So the data, again, is not only state specific, it's county and zip code and district specific. So we can analyze it down very, very far. And so absolutely, if you go even within the state of Tennessee over to Middle and East Tennessee, particularly Middle Tennessee, those costs are going to rise, right? Because housing is more expensive, et cetera. And so in West Tennessee, where it is relatively cheap to live and has been historically, you're still seeing families face these challenges. And that should be really eye-opening to us. And so ultimately, we have to talk about wages and things like that. The truth of the matter is, since 2020, we've seen quite a bit of wage inflation. Wages rose pretty drastically, somewhere around 9% or so over the last 5 years. And so our community saw people making more, but here's the problem. Real inflation rose even higher by about 13% over that same time period. So people are actually worse off today, even despite their wage inflation, despite their income going up, than they were 5 years ago. And people just haven't had the ability to keep up. And so I think we're particularly, feeling it at this point in time when we're recording this podcast at the end of 2025. It's a challenge for a lot of people. They're seeing price increases at the grocery store. They're seeing price increases when they go to try to buy a car, or even a used car, especially maybe a used car. They're seeing themselves being priced out of the ability to, what I would say, participate in what we call the American dream, which is home ownership. That's increasingly becoming incredibly difficult, particularly for our youngest citizens or Gen Zers who are entering into the workforce. And so there's these challenges that persist. And I think, we just as a community, as a state, and as a country just need to figure out, how we're going to try to address it.
And Matt, when a family finds themselves in this situation, it has the ripple effect, because if you want to go buy a car and can finance, your interest rates are higher. Your mortgage rates are higher. Everything is higher.
That's right.
And I was just reading an article this week about the dramatic increase in buy now and pay later.
Oh, yeah.
And so it just seems like it's like quicksand that these families get in this situation. They're working hard. They're good people.
Yep.
So what do we do?
Yeah, so I was at the St. Louis Fed a few weeks ago. I know you used to serve on the Community Development Advisory Council before me, and I have the privilege and honor now of sitting in that seat. And as we were there speaking both as a council with the data experts from the Fed, but also President Musalam was in the room, and we had an opportunity to kind of share some of this with him of like what we're seeing in our communities. That buy now, pay later issue was one of the core topics of that conversation. Joe, we are seeing people buy $30 hamburger meals, buy now, pay later.
Wow.
You're seeing people buy tacos, buy now, pay later. Because this technology has now been integrated across the board on their phones, and a lot of people use their phones now to pay for things. And so it just pops up for them. it gives them that option. It is not always the case that people are going and looking for it. It's available. And they're making what we would call micro purchases using that functionality, and they're building up debt. But also, like, the very fact that it's something that they would be so quick to do for such a small purchase is indicative of the challenges that they're facing. Because there are a lot of those families that if, again, speaking at the end of 2025, if their SNAP benefits were cut off because there was a government shutdown, they still have to eat. And if they're not getting the resources that they normally would, and again, they're working, but they can't cover everything with their paycheck because they don't make enough, then it leads them to some tough decisions. And then, of course, we can't have that conversation without talking about, your alternative lending services. And so in the state of Tennessee, which is the birthplace of alternative lending, the average interest rate that a person would take on when they go to get a loan through the payday loan, or whether that be a loan that they put their car lease up on and all that type of stuff, is 400% interest.
Unbelievable.
You can't get out of it once you get in. So these are the challenges they're facing.
Well, Matt, as you look at this, and I know you've done a lot of research, is this a function of lack of education? Is it a function of just the wages are too low? What do you think is the core function that causes, I guess, this to begin?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that. It is education at times. People don't know what they don't know, or they grew up in households where money wasn't talked about a whole lot. My dad was an accountant. Okay, my grandfather was a business owner. I have an aunt who's a broker. Yet, even in the household that I grew up in, I didn't talk a lot about money with my dad. And so I never talked about the process to buy a new car. I never talked about the process of buying a house until I went through those things. Now, when I went through them, he was available and there to help provide some advice. But what about all the money that I wasn't saving or was spending or whatever in the lead up to it, right? It's the bad habits that I had developed that I had to learn how to get out of. There are so many people who find themselves in those exact situations. There's just not been anybody in their life to really guide them. And so, that's a part of it. But also, yes, it's the wages issue. That's a part of it. But it's, as we talked about as well, the inflation issue. That's a part of it. But the other thing that I always have to point out is that when you look at the data, specifically for a place like West Tennessee, you also see some interesting things in how things have changed over time. And so I mentioned that my dad was an accountant. He didn't start out that way. He graduated from high school and went to work at Procter & Gamble here in Jackson, which is now Kellanova, at the Pringles factory. We make all the Pringles in the world, save for a factory that's also in Belgium. But he went to work there, and he just was a technician, which means he worked on the line, on the Pringles line. And that's where he started his career. And he worked there for a couple of years and then thought he would go to college. And no one in our family had done that yet. And so he saved up his money for those couple of years. And he, went to a supervisor and put in his 2-week notice and said, I'm going to go to school. And so supervisor came and spoke with him and said, hey, I got your 2-week notice. What's up, man? Like, why are you leaving? And he says, well, I want to go to college. And his supervisor said, we can send you to college. And that's what they did. Procter & Gamble sent him to Jackson State first, and he got some accounting classes because he asked him, what do you want to do? And he said something, related to accounting. Sent him to accounting classes at Jackson State Community College, then sent him to Union University to take accounting there. My dad never graduated with a bachelor's degree, but he got the training that he needed to go into the accounting department at Procter & Gamble, and he was there for 20-something years in the accounting department, and at Procter & Gamble for 31 years total, and then retired. The point of my telling that story is that's not normal today.
Sure. You
don't see companies offering those same types of benefits and those same services like they used to. And I don't want to make anybody upset or any of those types of things, but historically in places like West Tennessee, the gaps that existed between your plant managers, your CEOs of companies, and your everyday worker wasn't like what we see today. It just wasn't. And so there was a lot more pouring into an investment in your everyday people. That's part of the story. There's another part of the story, too, though, that is similar. America historically has also been this melting pot where it didn't matter necessarily how much you made, what type of job you had, etc. There were places in our communities where we overlapped, whether that was at church, whether that was in our parks, whether that was at the local gym or YMCA, wherever that was, you could be a CEO or president of a company, and you could be an everyday employee, and your paths would cross. And why that's important is because it's in those natural type of environments that opportunity arises. Raj Chetty is a professor at Harvard, and he's done a lot of research on all of this, on what he calls placemaking social mobility. And so the idea that the way that America's moved forward and upward historically is through cross-pollination that happens naturally in those types of environments. And what he's found in his research is that's happening less and less today compared to, say, 50 years ago. If you surveyed people back in the 1940s and you asked them how many of them believe that they would be better off than their parents by the end of their career, that's upwards of 80% of folks believe that they would. And in fact, 90% of them ended up better than their parents. When you survey Gen Z today, that number is pushing down into the low 40s that believe that they're going to be better off than their parents. And it's similar for millennials. It's hovering around 50%. And Gen X is one of the highest, but it's still just high 50s. And so there's a lack of confidence in today's communities around people believing that they can rise the socioeconomic ladder. And I think that when we look around at a lot of the issues that our country is facing, division and all that type of stuff, I think it's really seated in that.
And Matt, this happens at an early age because, and not, again, nothing controversial, but we have so many private schools today and the public schools, and, certainly when I was growing up, everybody went to public school,
Yep.
and it don't matter if you were the president of the bank
Yep.
or you were sweeping the sidewalk somewhere, the kids all went to school
Yep.
together. So this does start at a very early age. I know your organization is very involved with financial empowerment, which ties in with all this. So talk a little bit about your program and how you think that this is so necessary when you look at Alice and trying to get some of these people out of their hardships.
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, as you asked the question, a lot of this at times has to do with education or financial literacy. And again, people just not having the information, not knowing what they don't know. And so we were able to partner with the City of Jackson back in 2021 to apply for a grant through the Cities for Financial Empowerment. And what that allowed for is for us to establish West Tennessee's Financial Empowerment Center. And so through that center, we're able to provide free one-on-one counseling to anyone 18 years or older. And so that can look like helping them figure out a budget, helping them analyze the money that they have coming in and figure out, do I need to try to get more education? Do I need to try to get a better paying job? Do I need to find cheaper housing? It's all of those things. And so over the course of the past, 4 or 5 years since we launched that Empowerment Center, we've been able to help West Tennesseans decrease their debt by over almost $600,000. We've helped them to increase their savings by about $400,000 to $500,000. We've helped them increase their cumulative credit scores significantly. On average, the average Financial Empowerment Center individual increases their credit score instantly by 20 to 30 points in the first month or so. And so that may not seem like a lot. We had a client who, had dreamed to get a house. She was working with Habitat for Humanity, and she just could not get the loan because she couldn't qualify. And she was short about 20 points. And so that 30-point increase in a month triggered her ability to get accepted for that loan and to get onto that track of home ownership. And so, again, we're trying our best to reach everybody that we can across West Tennessee. We now not only have an office here in Jackson, we have an office in Brownsville and an office in Martin. And again, we're trying to serve everyone around West Tennessee. And again, most people, they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And some of them don't even know about the Financial Empowerment Center.
Okay. And with the Financial Empowerment Centers, is this a set time that you go through this process, or is it ongoing? How does that work?
We will meet with you as much as you want, almost as often as you want. And so some people just want that initial counseling session. But we have other people, Joe, who've been meeting for 4 years with our counselors. We have other folks who meet for, 2-3 months, and they get what they need and they're good to go. So it's no set program time. It ultimately comes down to the need of the client. And so during that first session, we'll do an analysis with the client to kind of understand what their needs are. And then we have a proposed schedule of how long it may take for them to reach certain goals that they may have. But again, sometimes that's really short. Sometimes that's really long. We even have clients who are business owners or who want to start a small business. And we can help guide them on that track as well. But sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long.
Matt, we have folks from all across the country that listen to our podcast, and we've been talking primarily about Tennessee. But if we've got a listener out there, and I think all of our economic developers that listen to this program should be interested in this subject we're talking about, because it has a direct impact on their community. If they want to find out more about their local area, how do they do that?
So there is a website called unitedforalice.org. That is the National Alice website. And they can go on that site and look at the data for their specific community. And there's a ton of resources that are available on that site. And so they can look at the type of data that we've talked about, but also there are indicators that they can zoom in on related to certain areas. So as an example, here in Tennessee, we're also able to pull out how many public libraries are in a community. What internet access do local residents have? How many of those residents qualify for SNAP benefits and those types of things? All this is available on the United for Alice site. They definitely can go look there. I would encourage them to connect with their local United Way as well, who's likely doing that work in their community. But again, we just want to grow this conversation. You probably have seen this just over the last 3-4 weeks. There's been a lot of different news coverage around these issues. They don't always call it Alice, but CBS News has run a special on this, particularly related to housing. Also, PBS NewsHour has run a special in the last 2-3 weeks on this issue as well. People are talking about this all across the country because folks are feeling the crunch. And so, we need to figure out what we're going to do as a community and how we're going to help our most vulnerable.
And Matt, I know I certainly encourage folks to do this because, a lot of times people like yourself and like me that work in this arena, we hear about this and we read about it. But wouldn't you encourage folks that are listening, this would make a great subject for a workshop?
Absolutely.
Or anytime you have leadership together to bring someone in to talk about your local area, to make them aware of this.
Absolutely. Workshops, we had a summit a few weeks ago where we brought together industry, government, development district, HRA, nonprofits, for-profits, like it was everybody into the room to have this conversation, healthcare, because again, this is affecting and impacting everybody. So yes, summits, workshops, podcasts, Again, we just need to keep spreading the word because, again, this is the challenge that people are having. But there are real things that we could do. So as an example, when we had our summit a few weeks ago, we distributed a family-friendly workplace guide, which provided policy recommendations on how to address some of these things. So, let's be honest. Not every company can just say we're going to pay our people more. It's not that simple. But there are other things that they can do to ease some burdens. And so that's the type of recommendations that we have in that policy guide to try to say to folks, hey, I'll never forget a couple years ago, we had a meeting at the local chamber with a few different companies who are seeing issues with childcare, particularly for their employees. That's a common issue across the country. And so one of the employers shared with us that they had a second shift job that they had hired 3 different people for the same position. And the reason why is that all 3 employees had childcare issues, but they need to get that shift covered. And so when 2 of them can't be there because of childcare issues, the other might be able to, or vice versa, right? Think about that. Like they're paying those folks and they're trying to make it work for 1 shift, but they had to hire 3 people. And so, we said to them, well, what would it look like if you as a company decided to, partner with a local childcare provider to pay some type of subsidized rate for those employees, and then you would have them more consistently. And they're really interested in that idea. So there's creative ways that we can address some of these things, but we just got to be all, willing to have the conversation and willing to come to the table.
Well, I want to thank Matt Marshall. This is a subject that we could really expand on, but I appreciate Matt being with us today. And let me tell our listeners, if you are interested in maybe getting in contact with Matt or getting some more information, we have an email at RuralStrong, and if you want to send us an email, and this is particularly for Matt, I'll be glad to forward it on to him. Our email address is ruralstrong@gmail.com. Matt, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks for joining us on Rural Strong. If you found this helpful, share it, and follow the show for more insights from rural leaders making a real difference. Until next time, stay rural strong.